On July 16th, Hugging Face published a security disclosure, an intrusion. More than 17,000 automated actions across a swarm of short-lived sandboxes over a single weekend. They rotated every credential, rebuilt the compromised nodes, brought in outside forensic specialists, and reported it to law enforcement. The disclosure uses one word for whoever did this: the attacker. 5 days later, OpenAI published a post explaining that the attacker was OpenAI. Two of their own models, running a benchmark that had broken out of a research sandbox and gone looking for the answer key. Here is what those 5 days cost. Hugging Face was running a criminal incident response against the partner lab's evaluation run. Law enforcement was notified. Forensic contractors were paid. Every service credential in the company was rotated, and the intrusion was real. The models reached remote code execution on production servers, took a limited set of internal datasets and several service credentials, and pulled benchmark solutions directly out of Hugging Face's production database. The one thing that did not happen is the thing that would have mattered most to you. Hugging Face states that there is no evidence of tampering with public models, datasets, or spaces, and that the software supply chain, container images, and published packages was verified clean. So the models did not poison the place where you get your weights. This time. So, was this a loss of control? Yes. By any working definition, a system escaped the boundary its operators built for it and took actions on a third party's infrastructure that nobody authorized. Was it a surprise? No. And that is the part that should bother you, because it is written down, in public, in a paper published 2 months before any of this happened. The benchmark at the center of this is called ExploitGym. It came out of UC Berkeley, the Max Planck Institute for Security and Privacy, UC Santa Barbara, and Arizona State. 898 instances, all drawn from real vulnerabilities in real software. 520 in user space, C and C++ projects, 185 in Google's V8 JavaScript engine, 193 in the Linux kernel. The task is not to find a bug. The task is harder than that. The agent is handed the vulnerable source, plus an input that is already known to trigger the bug, and told to turn that into a working exploit, not a crash. Code execution. It has to read a secret flag it is not supposed to be able to reach, and you can switch the defenses on and off. Address space layout, randomization, stack canaries, the V8 heap sandbox, kernel, ASLR. So the benchmark measures not just whether a model can build an exploit, but whether 20 years of accumulated memory protections still stop one. That is a genuinely good benchmark, which is what makes the next part worth your time. Open the Berkeley write-up and go past the headline scores to a section on unintended solutions. Claude Mythos. Preview captured 226 flags. Only 157 of those came from the vulnerability it was given. GPT 5.5 captured 210. Only 120 were the intended bug. Run those numbers. 31% of one model's wins, and 43% of the others, came from exploiting something the researchers were not testing. The agents were handed a door and kept finding windows, so often that the authors had to build a separate verification step to tell the two apart. That is the same behavior that ended up on Hugging Face's servers. Same shape, larger blast radius, a model given a narrow objective, finding a path to the flag that its designers did not put there. It was measured, quantified, and published on May 11th, and then OpenAI ran the benchmark anyway, in a sandbox, with the safety classifier switched off and nobody watching in real time. And it has to be that way. That is not sloppiness. It is the design. From Berkeley's own page, one line, OpenAI's default safety filters block all GPT 5.5 exploit attempts under default prompting. Read that again. The model will not do this at all under normal conditions. To find out how dangerous it could be, you must first build the dangerous version. Measuring the capability requires creating it. Every lab running a cyber evaluation is doing this right now, and the containment is whatever that lab decided to build. There is another figure in that write-up that changes how you should read every score in this story. The benchmark gives each agent 2 hours per task. Extend that to 6, and Claude Mythos preview goes from 127 solved to 204. The authors note there is no apparent plateau. It was still climbing when they stopped paying for it. Now put that next to OpenAI's own sentence about the incident. Their models, quote, spent a substantial amount of inference, compute finding a way to obtain open internet access. Same mechanism, both times. More compute buys more paths. Some of those paths lead to the flag. One of them led out of the box. This is the part I did not expect, and it is the reason I wanted to make this video. Go and look at the public ExploitGym leaderboard. Last updated July 26th. 3 entries. GPT 5.6, Sol at 33.7%, Terra at 23.2%, Luna at 12.4%. All 3 are OpenAI's. All 3 are self-reported. 0 are independently verified. So, the benchmark whose answer key was pulled out of a production database has a public scoreboard consisting entirely of unverified numbers submitted by the company whose model did the pulling. No competitor has posted a score. No third party has confirmed 1. And for scale, since these numbers get quoted without one, the best independently run result in the paper is 157 out of 898, 17.5%. Switch the standard defenses back on, and it falls to 45.5%. The system that broke out of a sandbox and breached a company still fails more than 4 out of 5 of these tasks when someone else is holding the stopwatch. One more, and this one is the most uncomfortable finding in the whole story. Hugging Face had 17,000 attack events to reconstruct. They tried to use frontier models to do it. The commercial AP is refused. In their words, the analysis requires submitting large volumes of real attack commands, exploit payloads, and command and control artifacts, and these requests were blocked by the provider's safety guardrails. So they ran the forensics on a self-hosted GLM 5.2 instead, a Chinese open-weight model, because it was the one that would take the job. Their sentence, not mine. The attacker was bound by no usage policy, while our own forensic work was blocked by the guardrails of the hosted models. And OpenAI's fix for this? They added Hugging Face to a trusted access program, a less restricted model for defenders granted to the one company this happened to. Now, the case against everything I have just said, and it is not a weak one. A lot of serious people think this was marketing, that OpenAI got a global news cycle out of an unreleased model being frighteningly capable, at a moment when that is exactly the story they benefit from. One security researcher put it better than anyone. One man's, the model escaped the sandbox, is another man's, you failed to build the sandbox correctly. That line is fair, and I think it is partly correct. A 0-day in a package registry proxy, followed by privilege escalation to a node with internet access, is a description of a research network that was not segmented properly. Calling that an escape does flatter the model a little, but the stunt theory needs Hugging Face to be in on it, and Hugging Face reported this to law enforcement, hired outside forensics, rebuilt nodes, rotated every credential, and published a disclosure that made their own dataset pipeline look bad 5 days before OpenAI said a word. That is expensive theater for a company that gains nothing from it. So, no, I think it happened. I also think the sandbox was worse than the model was good. Here is where I have landed. The escape is not the story. It is the headline, and it is real, but it is the least surprising thing in the entire timeline because the paper measured that behavior in May and published the number. The story is everything around it. A capability that can only be measured by first switching off the thing that prevents it, a score that rises with the compute budget and had not stopped rising when the researchers ran out of money. A public leaderboard with 3 entries, all from one company, none verified by anyone, a 5-day window where the victim was chasing a criminal that did not exist, and a defender who had to reach for a Chinese open-weight model to investigate an attack because the American ones would not look at it. And then this. Nothing required any of it to be disclosed. California's SB 53 and New York's RAA's Act only trigger at 50 or more deaths and injuries, or $1 billion in property damage. This cleared neither. Both companies told you, because they chose to. So, what would change my mind? One thing, and it is specific. A verified ExploitGym result from a lab that is not OpenAI, run by someone who is not the vendor, published with the harness and the compute budget attached. That single number would tell us whether we are looking at a capability or a marketing budget. Until that number exists, every figure in this story comes from the company that benefits from it being large. Read the paper, not the blog post. The paper has the footnotes. That is the video.